Hello, First Round Fantasy fans. Welcome on into the First Round Fantasy Podcast, your home for second round advice. I'm your host, Gabriel Miramontes, as always, joined by the full crew today, Jacob Bartley, Joseph Morsaz, and DeMont Ricks. Guys, what is going on?
Not much,
We're excited.
man.
Football's here, man.
That was so lame. I feel like I'm in my classroom, guys.
Hey,
I gotta
look,
start that over.
Everybody is still thinking about fantasy trades.
We were just talking
Joe
about
is,
trades right
I
up until
am
we started recording
on,
the show.
like,
So now
trying to
everybody's
fight off
minds are in different
offers.
places. We're all over the place, but you know what? We're here for your enjoyment. So if you are listening out there, thank you so much for tuning in. We really appreciate it. Today is the start of everything, guys. It is week 1. It's done and gone. We are in the thick of it now for the long run, and I couldn't be more excited. I'm giving my guys here a second chance. How are we doing today, fellas?
Fantastic.
I'm excited. I'm halfway hard. Let's go.
I still give that a 5
I'm
out of
happy
10.
I got my Shanahan trucker hat, but he doesn't even wear it anymore. But I finally got one. They were sold out everywhere for so long.
Probably because they only made 3 of them.
Shut the hell up. DeMont's got a half chub thinking about the trade I offered him. That's how he's got that.
Oh, another trash trade.
Well, we can talk about that later in our trade targets. Speaking of later, guys, we have an awesome show for you lined up today. We're going to be breaking down some injury news, some waiver wires, some sleepers, some sitting down guys that you don't think we should play this week, some trade targets, some keep trade cut, a whole bunch of good stuff. We even got a viewer question today, so I'm excited to get into it.
Nice.
With that being said, let's talk about some injury news, fellas. Starting it off, the big one, of course. If I could play the world's smallest violin, I own this guy in a couple of leagues. It's Michael Thomas, missing 2 to 3 week timetable. And I was just about to trade him to Joe before the news came out that it was going to be some time before we would see Michael Thomas on the field again. I don't know how I feel about it, but I'm not here to talk about how I feel. I'm here to talk about helping the fantasy football community. So with that being said, guys, I know that I'm bringing him up later on the show. So that's a foreshadow. But what are your instant reactions of Michael Thomas? Obviously, let's think about his surrounding parts. You have Emmanuel Sanders. You have Jared Cook. I believe Treadwell's there. Who are you feeling? Someone's going to have to absorb these targets. I mean, you're looking at a guy who had 100 and something odd targets last year, most in the NFL. There's got to be someone who benefits from this. Even Kamara himself. What do you guys think?
I mean, obviously, Sanders is going to get a bump, and Kamara's going to get a bump. But, like, I wouldn't go out and spend a waiver on, like, a Treadwell or anything like that. I would just try like a low sale on Sanders.
Low sale on Sanders, definitely. I know that I was able to pick up him on the waiver wires this week, being a Michael Thomas owner. I actually had him and Jared Cook. I do think Jared Cook sees a small bump. He was a guy that coming into this season we had talked about, he's going to have some touchdown regression. He's not going to be able to replicate what he did last year. Well, certainly you have to reconsider that now with the absence of Michael Thomas for at least a few weeks here. I picked him up hoping that he capitalizes it, at least in the short run, especially because I lost Blake Jarwin to the ACL tear.
This is tough, man. There's not much you can do because what do you trade him away for? I mean, we'll talk about trades later, but you're kind of stuck. You just have to wait. And it's not like there's not an easy answer. Like replacing him with Emmanuel Sanders on your fantasy team doesn't replace Michael Thomas's production value. So even though Emmanuel Sanders led the league in red zone targets in week 1 with 4, which is crazy, but that probably has to do with Thomas not being, on his A game or playing. Didn't he leave the game? When did he leave the game, or did it happen at the end?
No, he left the game in the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
So up until that point, he wasn't having, some would say his best game, his greatest game. He wasn't having a great game, hands down. I think he only had 4 or 5 targets, about 2 catches.
I mean, the obvious answer is now I think Emmanuel Sanders is a flex option, and Jared Cook is probably a top 12 option at the tight end. But other than that, look, Kamara will get some more receptions, but it's not going to be a huge difference, I don't think.
I mean, we did see in that first game that Kamara and even Latavius Murray, they got what was theirs. So it's easily imaginable to see them get that uptick in shares and targets and everything else as well. So happy news if you're a Kamara owner. Me.
Yeah. It's gonna be replacement by committee. Also, another name, the one dude that I actually think, Traquan Smith. If I'm looking at any of these guys, do they have Treadwell? I don't know.
They don't. He was on the Vikings. I got the Traquan.
I think they were thinking of Traquan Smith.
Yeah. I'm not gonna go out. I don't know. If you have an open spot, deep 12-man league, 10-man league, pick him up, see what happens.
It's like a 30-man league.
Well, you know what I think is going to happen? I think they're going to run more.
Yeah,
I think what's going to happen is they're going to run more. Latavius Murray might be a good flex option this week because they're playing the Raiders. They're going to be up most of the game. And so they're going to run. They're going to run more, and they might even throw Kamara in the slot a little bit and have some of the bigger wide receivers play on the outside. So I think Latavius Murray might get the most uptick from this.
You know what? This is a perfect segue because if they do put Kamara in the slot, I have trust that Drew Brees is not going to put him in a position to get hurt. Unlike someone we know, Jimmy G, who threw blindly and let George Kittle take the hard hit. He also hits our injury news.
I thought we were unbiased fantasy football advice podcast.
Just speaking the truth, my friend. It looks like Kittle's going to make
Jimmy G
going to take the field this season or take the field this week. He didn't practice today. Something to keep an eye on. Yeah, something to keep an eye. There's a very good chance he could not practice at all this week and still play on Sunday. So he should be good. Yeah. Miles Sanders was on the injury report. He looks to make his debut in 2020 in week 2. He's probably good to go. Next two are Le'Veon Bell and James Conner, two guys that had really big question marks coming into this season. And I don't know, Le'Veon Bell placed on the 3-week IR. I actually had someone drop him in one of my leagues.
Wow.
And I immediately picked him up because the Jets did nothing to entertain or make that backfield better. They only signed Kalen Ballage. So I think that team is in full tank mode. I don't think
those leagues. Am I?
You're not in any of those leagues, no. But it's sad news. But he should be bouncing back. The other guy who I'm really worried about, and we can talk percentages here, is James Conner. I'm like 100%. 80% red flagged on this guy. I'm scared for my life to start him ever again. What about you guys?
I agree, man.
I think with the injury and then how Snell performing so well, it just hurts.
Yeah, and we're definitely going to talk about Benny Snell here in a second as we transition. But James Conner, man, talk about a guy who – and it was interesting because if you were watching that game on Monday night, James Conner was gone. And they did not immediately report anything about an injury. He was probably sitting on the sidelines for about a whole quarter up until right before halftime did they even say anything about him. And I don't know if you guys caught it, but I was watching the game. I saw him visibly frustrated, and he actually exchanged a few words with Mike Tomlin and Ben Roethlisberger, like heated. So I don't know. It seems like frustration mixed with injury just leads to just a complete dismantlement of your team because he did fantasy owners dirty. And that is sad to say. But like I said, that's it for injury news. It is a perfect transition into waiver wire pickups of the week.
I'm ready to go in, Coach. Just give me a chance. I know there's a lot riding on it, but it's all psychological. Just got to stay in a positive frame of mind.
Now, of course, you guys are going to be listening to this show a little bit late this time around, but going forward, these episodes will drop every Tuesday morning, so you will have all of the best up-to-date news to notify you of your waiver wire pickups for the week ahead. Hopefully, you grabbed Benny Snell. He was one of the first waiver wire pickups that I had. I know that we're all going to name a few here. Benny Snell is one of the most obvious choices. 19 touches for 113 yards. He did lose a fumble, but given that there was no one else really behind him, he stayed in there. As we mentioned, James Conner was insufficient, injured, 6 carries, 9 yards. It was noted that Jalen Samuels was in on all third downs, pretty much every single one. But Benny Snell, 19 for 113. If James Conner misses any amount of time, I don't think that it's wrong to say that Benny Snell can easily keep that work.
I don't even care if James Conner doesn't miss time. Benny Snell flat out outplayed the hell out of that guy. And James Conner was plodding his way to 1.5 yards a carry, and Benny Snell comes in. And how many big runs did that guy have? I mean, it looked like it was every other play he was bouncing to the outside for a 10-yard pickup. And I was watching it like I was not that high on Conner coming in, and I'm glad I didn't take him in a single league. But if you did, I hope you had Benny Snell.
Yeah.
Because report was that he was easily number 2 coming in.
I'm gonna have to bite the bullet on this one, man. I was high on Conner all off season, talking him up, saying he has top 10 potential. And look, it's not that he had a chance to play a full 16 games and just came short. It's the injuries. And I respect him as a player, respect him as a guy, but I give up in fantasy. 2 years in a row, I get burned, and it's not his fault. Look, we're fantasy football managers. We get selfish sometimes, but for me, I just give up like rostering him as a starting running back on my team. You know what's gonna happen? I'm never, even if like he plays well this year, decent this year, and he comes back next year, or he goes to a different team next year, I'm gonna avoid him.
Yeah,
because I'm just done. And thank goodness for the league that I was depending on him the most. I had Benny Snell already. Thank goodness, because I would have been dropping 400 or 40 or 50% of my fab on Benny Snell if I didn't already have him. So,
you guys know where we didn't have Benny Snell? In our first round fantasies podcasters league. So
goodness.
We are screwed there. He has been picked up.
For him.
The worst case, I think, is if he comes back healthy and he looks okay. I still think it's going to be a running back by committee.
The thing is, with the eye test, Benny Snell looked so damn good. He looked great. So I'm rocking with Benny Snell, man. Even if James Conner plays, I might start Benny Snell this week in a league.
Yeah.
I'm sure you guys have some other waiver wire notable pickups this week. You guys want to bring them to the table? Jacob, Joe, Damon?
I'll let one of you guys take the obvious one. I got a little less obvious pick here.
Jacob, what's yours?
So, look, the top two ones were Benny Snell and Nyheim Hines, right? But and if we don't talk about Hines, we'll talk about him in a little bit. But I think one under the radar, and it's a wide receiver, is Paris Campbell from the Indianapolis Colts. He shared both him and T.Y. Hilton both had 9 targets. Look, I wanted to own this guy in a couple leagues, but I just didn't have a roster spot for him. And a lot of people were talking him up. He was supposed to be big last year, and he didn't quite live up to it. And everybody was high on the rookie of Michael Pittman Jr. And myself too. I had Michael Pittman Jr. in a league over with Paris Campbell on the waiver wire. And I just think if you need a solid flex option, you're one of these guys who lost Michael Thomas or another big wide receiver this week, or questionable guy, Kenny Golladay. Paris Campbell's not a bad guy to slide into your starting lineup as a flex option this week.
I agree with that. I think I had a receiver and a running back. I'm going to mention the receiver, but I want to talk about the running back. Robbie Anderson, I think, showed out really well, and I heard he's number 2. But mine, it was actually Jerick McKinnon. And the reason for that is I think –
great pick.
Listen, here's my thinking. There's a lot of wide receivers out there. Paris Campbell, Robbie Anderson. The waiver wire, I looked, even after the waivers went through, there were still a few guys on there I liked. Yeah. But for running back, it gets picked clean instantly. Nyheim Hines, Malcolm Brown, if those guys, Benny Snell, if they were on the waivers, they were taken top 3. But guys like Jerick McKinnon kind of slide through, and I think he's got some potential in the pass game. He had 5 targets. He ended up getting a touchdown. He had 3 catches, and I think he got a little running work. I think he had 24 yards on the ground on 8 attempts or 6 attempts, something like that. So he showed out, and he had potential for 10-plus touches as a running back in a high-scoring offense, which I expect the Niners to bounce back. But we're also down receivers. Kittle might not play. McKinnon's going to have a big role, at least for the next couple of weeks, I think.
The Niners did just sign Mohamed Sanu. I guess that could have been some news we got into. I don't think it's very relevant, but he should put a little bit of help there, I guess. But no, great pick, Joe. Jerick McKinnon, man, if he didn't bring clarity to that backfield, which he didn't, but he did bring talent. So it's going to be a confusing one for sure, but probably one of the most comfortable, uncomfortable situations for fantasy owners. I'll have one more that I'll throw out there, and this is in the tight end era. If you missed out on Jared Cook, he was a hot commodity. Jonnu Smith, Tennessee Titans tight end, he did have 7 targets, 4 receptions, and a touchdown. I do feel like he is someone that you could probably depend on, not necessarily week in and week out. And I don't want to say you should roster 2 tight ends, but if you had someone like a Blake Jarwin and you were already taking a shot on him like I was, Jonnu Smith was sitting there, and I think he's going to have some really good weeks that are serviceable for fantasy.
Yeah, I think we should touch on Nyheim Hines though too.
Yeah,
what do
obviously.
You guys think? Let's say you don't have James Conner or Jonathan Taylor on your team, or what's his name? The guy who just got on the IR from Indianapolis. I forget.
Marlon Mack.
Marlon Mack. You don't have any of those guys. You're free of those backfields, but you had the option to add Benny Snell or Nyheim Hines in a full PPR league. Who would you guys have chosen?
In a full PPR? I would take Nyheim Hines. Yeah, for sure.
Okay. So my most overrated waiver wire pick this week, and a lot of people had him on their teams already, was Malcolm Brown. I think, look, people are thinking he's the starting running back on the Rams now. I don't think so. I think it's going to be a committee, and especially when Henderson comes back, it's going to be similar to San Francisco where all 3 guys are getting play. So do you guys agree with that Malcolm Brown's being a little overrated right now?
Yeah, he's a veteran plotter, man. He got a lot of touches, but that game plan was specific for him and Akers. And Akers still had, 14 carries? I think they ran the ball 34 times, 36 times, something like that. I didn't see Henderson. Henderson was healthy, but I think he only got 1 touch and 5 snaps the entire game. I don't know if he was still – I know he was injured coming in, so we'll see. But I agree, dude. Malcolm Brown, listen, it's not that he's not a good pickup because he still has some value for a couple of weeks, I think. But Akers is going to slowly start to take that lead dog role. So long-term, season-long, I like Snell and Hines better than Malcolm Brown.
That's a fair assessment. Damon, you have one?
Yeah, I have one, kind of a sleeper. I wouldn't say he's much of a waiver pick, like especially if you have like the number 1. But if you're willing to stay up till midnight, I would say grab Russell Gage because there's 2 players that get 12 targets. That's a fluke. Like, that's a lot of targets. Yeah. Atlanta is a team that's going to throw the ball. You're going to give, Gurley 12 carries and then Hill, 5 carries? So when they win, they're going to throw the ball. And you have Julio, Ridley, and I think Gage is that 3rd guy. You don't get 12 targets just for fun.
He's an interesting man. When we came into this year, we all kind of thought Hayden Hurst was going to take that Austin Hooper role. I'm kind of starting to think like what DeMont's saying is that they may go to 3 wide receiver heavy where Gage kind of gets a lot of Hooper's targets, and Hayden Hurst kind of fills in. He got 5 targets. He's a nice pickup, or he's a nice tight end if you need one on a bye week or something. But Russell Gage may be the guy. I looked at him in a couple leagues, DeMont. Absolutely.
Yeah, 12 targets is a lot.
12 targets, and like Damon had mentioned, 3 of those wide receivers, the big ones, Calvin Ridley, Julio Jones, and Gage, they all saw upwards of 10-plus targets. So it's safe to say – I wouldn't say safe to say, but fair to say that they could easily see those again, especially in that high-passing offense.
Didn't they all break 100 yards?
They all broke 100 yards as well. Calvin Ridley was the only one who capitalized on the touchdowns. But other than that, I feel like that could fall each way every week. So with that being said, guys, I think we're going to move on. So we have a segment here on the show called our Dark Horse Candidates of the Week, or our Dark Horse Starts of the Week. First round Fantasy's Dark Horses of the Week. Now, Generally, you see this on other podcasts as well, but guess what? We're different yet kind of the same because we got a cool little name attached to it. So with this dark horse segment, we're picking guys, obviously not necessarily the top 10s, the CMCs, the Lamar Jacksons, none of those guys who are clearly studs who you should be starting week in and week out despite matchups. But more so middle of the road guys who you may not be entirely confident on coming into the year or in the middle of the year. And we're here to just kind of reassure you that these guys are here to play, they're here to stay, and they're going to have good weeks, especially on the weeks that we mentioned, for instance, this week. And if you'd like, I'd like to start us off. I have two because I thought of one. I don't even know which one to go with now because they're just so juicy. If I have time, I'll go for the other one. But my first one is going to be AJ Green, wide receiver for the Cincinnati Bengals. We talked a lot about AJ Green coming back off of a full absence last year. There was question marks, reasonably so. Was he going to be successful at age 31? Now, although that is yet to be seen, we saw a small sample size. 9 targets led the team as compared to Boyd, who only saw 5 targets. He had 5 receptions. I think this year, or not this year, last week he was matched up with Chris Harris, lockdown corner of the Los Angeles Chargers. I think he gets a softer matchup this year with a Browns secondary that is horribly plagued by injuries in that secondary. I look for AJ Green to have a really successful day, probably catching anywhere between 6 to 7 balls and a touchdown. Could crack 100 yards. If so, that's a great play for a flex play in your offense this week. What about you guys? And the silence looms.
Wait, let's see who's going.
Hold on, who do we?
Gabe, just throw it to somebody after the end, like when you introduce it. Throw it to somebody.
Guys, we're 14 episodes in, and you're just now telling me that I'm doing something wrong by just saying, what do you guys think? I got to start pulling sticks like class.
My start of the week is going to be
Damon, your dark horse of the week. Your dark horse start of the week. We got to hammer the segments down,
My dark horse start of the week is Deontay Johnson, just because I feel like people are going to bench him this week. But you don't bench somebody that has 10 targets. He's my breakout of the year. He started the game with a fumble, a few bad drops. But Big Ben, at the end of the game, he was looking for this guy. They're comfortable together. He caught 6 balls, 57 yards. And I think it's going to be much more of the same. Who are they playing? They're playing with Denver. Denver's not too tough, so that's my start of the week. Like, say you're choosing between like a TY and a Deontay and like your flex spot. Personally, I go Deontay.
Wow. Hey, and Juju's a little banged up too. We'll see. I mean, he'll probably play, but
bad on Juju. You keep his name shut out of your mouth. Damon, that's a great pick. And not to throw you under the bus, Joe, but if there's anyone I know who likes to tweet out his instantaneous thoughts, it's Joe Morsaz. And in the first quarter of that game, Joe tweeted something along the lines of Deontay Johnson, bust of the year, or something along those lines. Probably not.
Man, it wasn't that serious. It wasn't
that
great
second half. So
but listen,
I'm proud that you had that pick, Damon. That's a good pick.
Juju's the man over there. Okay, since you called me out, give me 30 seconds. Juju's the man over there. Okay. But listen, Washington had a role. Yeah. Claypool's going to have a bigger role as the season goes on. They talked about it. He's that big threat that they were missing last year. And Deontay Johnson's probably the best of that bunch, but it's not a clear, like, you look at some other teams where you're like Cooper Kupp, Robert Woods, those are 2 guys. There's not a third guy challenging. But Washington and Claypool are going to challenge Deontay for snaps. He's not going to get 100% of the snaps like Juju might, or a clear-cut number 1 or 2. So it was more of an overreaction. Listen, we're watching the game. I'm talking crap to my boy. But yeah, I'm glad he salvaged his game. I'm glad he did.
And with that being said, Joe, I'll let you reestablish yourself. Who is your dark horse starter of the week?
Oh, God, this is hard because I like 2 of them. But I'm going to go CeeDee Lamb, boys.
Oh, that was my number 1. But I have a couple more.
I'm going to go CeeDee Lamb because they're playing Atlanta. Yep. The Cowboys got shown up on, what was that, Sunday Night Football against the Rams, who were not that great last year. But I'm looking more for a shootout this week. And I think one thing that we established last week, guys, is CeeDee Lamb is better than Gallup. I think so. CeeDee Lamb already coming out looked like
Week 1 overreaction.
He didn't even do that great.
That's what I'm naming this video is overreacting to week 1 because realistically that's what we're doing. But go ahead.
Wait, listen. It's not that. Listen, CeeDee Lamb didn't have a great fantasy game. I think he had 9 points in PPR.
Yeah.
But the reason I say that is just because he looked amazing out there. He was running routes perfectly. He was catching the ball. He was getting yards after catch. He held his own. He didn't look like a rookie. Amari Cooper was obviously targeted something crazy like 12, 14 times, and he was heavily involved in that game. But I'm looking at CeeDee Lamb and thinking week 6, he's clear-cut number 2. Right now, he's in that fold with Gallup where they're going to switch off, and I like him in the slot a lot more than Gallup on the outside because Cooper's the outside guy over there. So I'm looking at CeeDee Lamb in a shootout against Atlanta.
That is a great pick, Joe. That's a great pick. I definitely had a moment today where I was deciding between him and someone else. Obviously, I can't remember the other person's name. And I have CD there for the time being because seeing what Russell Wilson was he dismantled that offense or that defense.
Well, that's the thing. We were talking about Gage, right? Who all 3 guys got 100 yards and didn't they all get 12 targets or more or something like that? No, that's crazy. And imagine what Dak's going to be able to do against.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Jacob, what's your dark horse of the week?
My first choice was CeeDee Lamb, and my next one is a serious one, and it's if you need a quarterback. No, I'm serious because
guys, wait, guys. Guys,
I know Lamont and Gabe are going to get crap for this, but
guys, wait. This is serious. Jacob, go
serious. You're going to start the man, Jimmy G.
Jimmy G? Yeah,
boy. Man, look. They're playing the Jets. They're playing the Jets this week.
Oh my God!
Not Kyle Allen. What's his name? It's not Kyle Allen. It's Gabe's favorite quarterback.
Oh,
Josh Allen.
Josh Allen played very well against the Jets. The Jets are terrible, and I think the Niners are going to get up early. Whatever, it doesn't matter who he's throwing to. If Sanu going to play this week, Sanu's going to have 2 touchdowns. I don't know if Kittle's going to play. The running backs, 2 of the running backs are going to have passing touchdowns, and Jimmy G's going to have a rushing touchdown too. So I think
5 touchdowns, Jacob. What the hell?
No, one of them is going to be a trick pass from like one of the receivers are going to throw a touchdown to one of the running backs or something.
Sorry, go ahead, finish up.
But bottom line is if you need a quarterback and some of those bottom 10 guys have a bad matchup, or like let's say I'm not necessarily doing this, but let's say you're worried about Drew Brees because Michael Thomas is not out there. He's playing the Raiders, so I'm not worried about it. But
I have a couple for you guys.
Well, I think he's going to be a bad one. But my non-quarterback play is, and people are starting him, but Kareem Hunt, man, look, running back is so hurting right now. Like over in fantasy football. Like Joe was pointing this out to me in one of our leagues. Look at your league mates. A lot of people have crap players in their number 2 running back spot, or their flexes are 2 receivers everywhere.
Always, yeah.
Kareem Hunt might be a better fantasy player than Nick Chubb this season.
I've been saying it, Jacob. Thank you. Preach, brother.
If Miles Sanders is out again this week, I'm starting Kareem Hunt as my number 2 running back in 2 leagues. So if you need a running back, look, I don't even think it's a sleeper, but I think people aren't as aware. So Kareem Hunt.
Gabe, stop disrespecting the man. Listen, he's got a great point. Kareem Hunt is catching balls, and he's gonna
and faces with his kicking.
Baker Mayfield sucks, bro.
I would like to apologize to the first round fantasy listeners. That Kareem Hunt advice, great, 100% take it. But that Jimmy G, I'd rather have a Mark Tuiasopo.
Let me settle us down here. Let me reel it back in. Let's refer back to Jimmy G. Kareem Hunt is a good pick, Jacob. I'll give you that.
Great pick.
I also picked up Jimmy G. Not necessarily in a 10-team league, but in a 2 QB league. And I'm debating between someone like him and Derek Carr this week.
Great start in a 2
Who would you guys rather start this week? Derek Carr at home to open up Las Vegas on Monday Night Football against the Saints, who got a shootout with Tom Brady.
Carr, easy.
Or Jimmy G heading to New York, playing that weak-threaded New York Jets defense.
Unbiased opinion, look at what the Saints just did to Tom Brady. He did not look great. And I get it's Tom Brady and he's old and whatever. He's got Godwin and Evans and Gronkowski. The Saints have one of the most underrated defenses, especially secondaries in the entire league. I don't trust.
We'll leave it up to the viewers and we'll book it down. Okay,
Yeah.
Who has a better fantasy week this week?
I'll take that all day.
Or Derek Carr?
Jimmy G.
I'm taking Jimmy G.
I'll take a hundo right now.
You're going Derek Carr, Demont?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
I'm telling you, if it was reversed, if Derek Carr were playing the Jets and we were at home to the Saints, I would take Derek Carr. I'm not even.
Yeah, I would take Derek Carr, no doubt.
Yeah, McKinnon are going to feast though.
It's not because I'm a Niner.
When you're playing an inferior team, you run the ball. You don't just throw the ball.
Yeah, I understand that,
You have
but
to get up first to run.
The Raiders are going to be running the ball with Jacobs because that's their money. He just had 3 touchdowns last week. Did Derek Carr throw one?
Let me propose one more here, and I don't have a sleeper, so I'm going to give one more dark horse, but then we're going to move on. But one more comparable QB start this week. You have Deshaun Watson, who didn't necessarily show out in a otherwise appetizing matchup to open the season. It gets harder. He goes to Baltimore to face that crazy defense. So would you start someone like him or Jimmy G this week, knowing that most of us have Deshaun Watson as a consensus top 10?
You have to start Deshaun.
You got to go with Watson,
Yeah. Look, even in a bad week, he saved his week with 2 touchdowns at the end. It's not even a choice.
That's fair to say. Well, it's something to definitely put on your minds. I got the book it down tracked, so we are good to go. I will throw out one last dark horse there before we jump to sits of the week. My other dark horse is Ronald Jones, running back for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Again, another guy who did not have a lot of clarity around him this year coming into the season, especially with the signing of Leonard Fournette. Well, for all intents and purposes, he showed out enough to at least hold on to his job for another week. 17 carries for 66 yards. He had a few receptions tacked on top of that. He looked absolutely 100% better than Leonard Fournette did.
He's fighting for his job, though. I saw him running, man. He was running hard.
Not only that, they take on a Miami defense that is easy shreddable when it comes to the running game. My New England didn't take as much advantage of it. At least Cam Newton did. But I look for them to be shredded week in and week out by the opposing running backs. And I think this is a good week for Ronald Jones. So if you're considering it, I would definitely just push you in the right direction and say do it. We are moving on now. This is our next segment. We like to call it Fool's Gold.
You are out of here. Whatever. I don't really care. I'm just going to sit this one out.
Fool's Gold, again, same type of segment, flashy name to make it sound a little bit cooler. These are players that, you know what, they look really appetizing. You want to go out there because you know they're going to have a good game. We're here to tell you, bruh, that's a whole pile of dookie waiting for you if you put that guy in your lineup. And that's what Fool's Gold is. Guys that look good, that may be in good or difficult matchups, and you're just here to say, hey, I think you should temper your expectations. We're not saying these guys are necessarily going to tank, exactly put up duds for your fantasy team, but they're not going to meet your expectations. So with that being said, Jacob, would you like to lead us off with your sit or Fool's Gold player of the week?
Yeah, man. So I'm going to go, and it's not a surprising one, but I'm going to go with Mark Ingram. I don't know if that was a fluke, that game last week, where it was just weird. Like, he wasn't treated like the starting running back of that team, but also they were tearing up the Browns. Did they have to use Mark Ingram in the red zone? And did they just want to give Dobbins his first 2 touchdowns as a rookie? I don't know, but I don't feel comfortable starting Mark Ingram as my number 2 running back on my team. I would be very worried. I honestly, like, if I had to choose between him and Dobbins, I would probably throw Dobbins in my lineup. I don't know, because I'm just very, very worried about it. And look, they're not going to beat the Texans as easily as they beat the Browns. So which means I don't think they're going to do as much. They're not going to have the lead, like a comfortable lead the whole time and rushing a lot. So I'm not comfortable starting Mark Ingram. So it's okay if you're deciding between Kareem Hunt and Mark Ingram, I say start Kareem Hunt.
I like that.
That's not a hot take, Jacob. That's a good take. Yeah, Mark Ingram, he looked it looked like his age was also showing up, and they definitely conserved his touches towards the end of the game. I think going into a matchup that is going to be at least a little bit more competitive in the Houston Texans will give him his regular workload. But by golly, if it doesn't, then it's time to put up some red flags. And you might be jumping the gun here a little early, Jacob. But if you did and it's true, then by all means, we give it to you because that was a great call. Yeah. Joe, what about your Fool's Gold Player of the Week?
You guys are not going to like this. And listen, fair warning.
Yeah.
Listen, you're probably starting him because I don't think you have a better option. But Joe Mixon. And
get out of here, Joe. You're off the show.
He's going against Cleveland. And you guys we just got done talking about Baltimore. Okay, listen, Baltimore was the number one running offense in the league last year, right? A lot of that had to do with Lamar Jackson, but Mark Ingram was great. Gus Edwards had his weeks. They all had a really good season. Dobbins did okay, but he got 3.1 yards per carry. It's just that Mark Ingram had 2.9 yards per carry and looked awful in his 10 touches too. I don't think Cleveland's defense is that bad. And I don't think that the Bengals are going to have a ton of success running this year. And that was kind of my worry with Mixon from the get. And I don't think he had that many targets last week. And I think that offense is going to be, kind of getting Burrow going a little bit more and trying to get AJ Green involved and Tyler Boyd some more touches. And so listen, you're probably not benching him because I don't think you have a better option. But if you're in a league where somehow you have Mixon as your third running back and you're deciding between, do I throw in this receiver, whoever, nothing crazy, but maybe a top 25, top 30 receiver. I may be in a situation where I'm picking Robert Woods or Mixon. I'm starting Robert Woods. I'm not even thinking twice about it. Hollywood Brown. I'm starting Hollywood Brown over Mixon. I'm not even thinking twice about it. So if you're in a situation where you have two good running backs that you like, I would bench Mixon, but I don't think many people are there.
It's a hot take. It's a hot take, but a necessary take. And I appreciate you, Joe. I am someone who is definitely starting Mixon this week because I have no other options. Mm-hmm. And with that being said, you're right. He did not. I mean, you're looking at a guy who just signed an offseason contract. He got paid. He's going to be there for the next 4 or 5 years. And you're thinking they're going to come out week one and just feature this guy. No, he kind of got stuck at the line. He had a hard time getting the day going, and he didn't see any targets. I mean, he saw maybe 2 or 3.
Two targets, 1 reception, 2 yards. Yeah.
Exactly. So not enough to get you excited for what you thought could have been. Now, it's easy to say this week. Sure, why not? But I think he's still a hold as the season continues for sure.
Like I said, I'm starting year. I think he was pretty terrible 8 to 10 weeks. And then all of a sudden he's killing it the last 6 to 8 weeks of the season. So, yeah, I wouldn't panic and trade him. But if you could get great value for him, I wouldn't be against it.
It's definitely a questionable but a good question to ask yourselves going into this week. Damon, what is your Fool's Gold Player of the Week?
I have 2 receivers. One you might have drafted as a flex, and one you might have drafted as your wide receiver 2, and that is Odell is a flex, and then Keenan Allen was your number 2. I wouldn't start either of those 2 guys. I'd rather start like a guy like a Gage, who has a higher ceiling, or like this was one of my waivers of the week that we didn't get to, but Darius Slayton as well.
Oh, that's a good one. That's a good one.
One of those 2 over Keenan Allen, who you thought was going to be like your wide receiver 2, but he just doesn't have that same connection as he did with Phillip Rivers.
He does not. I'm glad you mentioned it. He does not have a connection with Tyrod Taylor at all. And surprisingly, Tyrod Taylor was throwing it deep, which made Mike Williams an appetizing waiver wire target this week. But it was a sad sight to see because you drafted Keenan Allen in the 4th or 5th round thinking he'd be your solid wide receiver 2, potentially even a steal of the draft because he was going to be peppered with these short targets from Tyrod Taylor, and that was not the case in week 1. And it's safe to say that I'm off of all Charger receivers until we see Justin Herbert in there.
Yeah, well, I think in that Chargers game, dude, the scariest thing was Eckler, which is kind of another – maybe for another topic, but man, 1 target.
That's
Austin
crazy.
Eckler, the guy who had 90 receptions last year, had 1 or 2 targets.
If that's any indication of what Philip Rivers was able to do for that offense when he was there, it was to provide passing work for the running backs because we immediately saw I can't say his first name, Nyheim Hines. We saw him flourish in
Taylor,
a passing back role, and Taylor. So Philip Rivers, dink and duck quarterback. Tyrod Taylor, he no dinky dunky. He liked to runny, and he didn't even really run. So So it's interesting to say the least for sure. I'm not too worried about Eckler. Anthony Lynn came out and said we're going to get more involved in the passing game. I hope that's just not coach talk. But this is just week 1. I don't want to get too scared, but I'm starting him.
Kelly looked good. He looked good, and he got some goal line work.
Yeah, I could see it easily being a Melvin Gordon, Eckler type second half of the season like last year. But even then, Eckler still had fantasy relevance. Maybe not the running back 2 numbers you would want, but he's still going to be a high flex player.
He was the 5th best once Gordon came back, so he could still do that, I think.
That is true. That is true.
Well, Jacob called it all summer, guys. Joshua Kelly, keep him on your radar. If he was on the waivers, he has got standalone value, I think.
I had Josh Kelly on my bench in a league all off season. Like we did an early draft and I had him on my bench all off season. I knew he was going to, I didn't know, but I liked him a lot more better than Justin Jackson to take that Melvin Gordon role for sure.
Definitely.
All right, fellas, we're moving on. We are talking about some trade targets of the week. This is going to be a segment that'll be in and out. However, trade deadlines aren't coming for about 8 or 9 weeks now, so why not include it every single week? My trade target of the week is a guy I actually own, but I would consider you go out and get him if you have the necessary depth to give up, and that is Michael Thomas. Joe and I were talking about this earlier, and he had mentioned another sports athlete not in the NFL, but De'Aaron Fox of the NBA, who suffered a high ankle sprain similar to what Michael Thomas suffered last week. And De'Aaron Fox's injury kept him out for 2 months. Given these are 2 different sports, it's not an injury that you want to necessarily play with. I do think that Michael Thomas will be back. I think I'm perfectly comfortable with them taking the extra week if they want to hold him out 3 weeks so that he can come back as better and more improved than ever. But with that being said, if I'm looking for someone to trade for and I have the necessary depth, I'm looking at that guy who has Michael Thomas. Did he lose week 1? Is he suffering now? Or is he going out there and he's just losing his mind because he's afraid that he lost his number 1 pick? In most instances, this was people's number 1 pick or early second round pick. Like for me, there are people that are panicking out there and they're willing to give him up for that 0-1 start to, let's be honest, people like to start off fantasy seasons winning games. They don't want to get off to the slow start because they can easily get deterred. They want the fast, hot start. Without Michael Thomas in that lineup invested as your first round pick, you're going to be nervous. I'm looking for that guy anywhere, and I'm saying, hey, I'll give you a few startable wide receivers if you want to rent me, and I can take Michael Thomas off your hands. So that is my trade target of the week. I'm not giving him up, by the way, fellas. I know I put his name out there earlier in group chats. He's not going anywhere.
I mean, of course you would for the right offer. I always say, don't ever say a player's not available. That's my rule with trading. Everyone's available for the right offer. But we just talked about my favorite trade target. And this is what I hate about doing a podcast with my friends who I'm in leagues with, because I give away – look, it ruins potential things that I can do, like offer Gabe trades for Austin Eckler, because I think Austin Eckler is a great trade target. If you're in a league – and you have a buddy who is very disappointed with Austin Eckler's performance this week, look, everybody does it. We're all overreacting to week 1. There's things in week 1 that are actually like legit like things that are going to carry on through the season, but there are things that are flukes. I think Austin Eckler, his usage. Well, look, he still had 19 carries. That's
sir.
That's great,
84
but
yards
he wasn't used a lot in the passing game. And I didn't watch that game, but I'm guessing, I don't know if it was his passing called for in that game necessarily, because it seems like it was a close game, right? So they must have been running a lot. If Kelly had 13, 14 carries for 60 yards, and then Eckler had 19 carries, and I'm sure there probably were more carries in the game as well. So don't be too down on Austin Eckler if you have him. Like, don't give him away for cheap, and also try to get Austin Eckler. Maybe you have a couple guys that you can package for an Austin Eckler in your league. That would be my trade target, especially considering how slim running backs are right now.
Yeah, I agree. If he didn't look bad at all, and I think that offense with Tyrod Taylor, that's going to be able to support 2 running backs. And Eckler's definitely, at least through this season, is going to be their number one. It's about the passing work. I need to see more. If I saw 5-6 targets and maybe only he caught 2 of them for 6 yards, his game wasn't necessarily better, but I have more faith in that. But I like it.
Joe, let's hear yours.
I'm going to go with a crazy one, guys. I'm not sure it makes sense, but Miles Sanders is my trade target of the week, and it's because there's a couple reasons. Number one, Boston Scott stepped in. I remember I was looking. I have Miles Sanders in 3 out of 5 leagues, and I'm looking all night the night before. What's going to happen? And I start to hear, or a few nights before, and he gets announced out. All of a sudden, Boston Scott's in the conversation on Twitter. Everybody's hyping up Boston Scott. He's a running back too. I'm starting him over these guys and this guy. And Matthew Berry even said, fire him up as a running back too. And Corey Clement's even in my list. Well, those guys disappointed. And I think that's more of a reason that Miles Sanders is going to come in and he's going to get workhorse running back touches. He's going to get you 20 touches a game, a couple of catches, some goal line work without a doubt. And I love him as an RB2 the rest of the season. And I think if somebody, again, like we talked about, is panicking that, hey, my guy's injured. Is he going to be healthy? Is he not? I need to get, something out of it. You've got yourself an easy money trade target right there that some people don't love him. My brother was texting me yesterday saying he's a bum. He's a bum because he missed one day.
He hasn't even played yet. That's the thing, Joe. I love that call because he hasn't played yet. When he plays this Sunday and he blows up, he has a great game. Now everybody's going to love him. So if you're going to trade for him, do it now. He might disappoint. He might not play, but now's a good time to trade for him because look, the Eagles all their guys are getting hurt and their receivers didn't look great. They're feeding the tight ends. I like that call.
Yeah.
It's a good call. Damon, you have one to kick us out of this segment?
Yeah, I have a specific one, and it's only if you have players that overperformed last week. I would try and target a Saquon Barkley, like a guy that's 0-1 right now. He's sitting on Barkley and likes a Carson and Ridley. So if I had Carson or Ridley, I would attempt to contact that Barkley guy and try and get Saquon.
In a redraft league, for sure, I would entertain that idea. It was terrifying. It was terrifying. Yeah. He had his few passes that made him look spectacular. Yeah. Other than that, man, I think it was more so spoke to the Pittsburgh Steelers defense. That dude was thrashed. He didn't even get to the line. But it wasn't until the fourth quarter he had negative yardage.
Everybody that plays the Giants is gonna do that. It's not specific to Pittsburgh. They're gonna put 7 guys in the box and stop them.
They have Watt and they have some other guys. They have a damn good defense. So I think part of it was that. But Damon, you're right. That's why I'm not that high on Saquon. After watching that game, I expected so much more from New York. And we heard the talk all summer about Daniel Jones finally has weapons. Evan Ingram's healthy. He's got Slayton balled out, but he wasn't even a huge conversation. It was mostly Shepard and Tate and Saquon Barkley and Ingram and all these. Dude, that offense looked like ass. I didn't want to.
You guys do Carson, Ridley for Saquon at this point?
I wasn't high on Anderson after that week, but if you give me David Johnson and Calvin Ridley and I needed depth, I would consider it.
Okay, that's crazy.
Yeah.
See, but you would never consider that beforehand. So that's
No, of course not. You're not trading the number 2 overall pick or number 3 overall pick for a couple of 5th rounders or 4th rounders. You're not doing it.
I'll tell you right now, I'm not going to do that trade. It is week 1. That is probably the best defense in football this year, right up there with the Baltimore Ravens. And that is another example of Jacob's overhype sensation of week 1 studs and duds.
Are we doing a sell at all? Who to sell?
Well, Joe, goodness gracious, man. Why are you bleeding out our segments? You know what? Actually, not this week, Joe. That is next week. We're moving on. We're in the essence of time here. We're going to talk our segment of the week, which is why do I always fumble that up? Trade, keep, cut. Now, these guys might not be appetizing, and you can think about them as I describe them for you guys. This first player, he was looking to define himself in a number 2 role. He had an opportunity to put himself on the fantasy map in week 1, and we saw a touchdown roll off of his fingertips, which should have been a sure thing, which would have made him fantasy relevant. This next guy is someone, do you guys want to take a guess at who that was?
DeAndre Swift.
It was not DeAndre Swift. It was N'Keal Harry.
Huh?
It was N'Keal.
Okay.
Come on, Gabe.
This is all wide receivers.
Nobody else could have won a game.
This is all wide receivers.
You.
For this trade, keep, cut segment today, keep your mouth shut. It's wide receivers. We're keeping it on, all right? This next guy, he had a great performance. He was likely not on the radar for anybody. He was a hot waiver wire pickup. We mentioned him this week. It's likely that some people might even start him this week, and that's Robbie Anderson.
Mm-hmm.
And my last player plays for a team who got obliterated. He will be peppered with targets throughout the season. He did break a long touchdown this in week 1, and that's Jamison Crowder. So keep, trade, cut. As we look into the season ahead and redraft perspective, who are you trading, who are you keeping, and who are you cutting? And I'll leave it to all 3 of you guys. Jacob, I'll start with you.
I am for damn sure cutting N'Keal Harry. If those are my choices. I really like Robbie Anderson now after watching that game, to be honest. I'm not saying he's going to be my for sure starter, but I like keeping him on my bench, maybe a flex play. So I'm going to trade Rashad Perriman, hoping somebody bites on the big game.
Jamison Crowder.
Oh, was it Jamison Crowder?
Yeah.
Sorry, Jamison Crowder. I was getting confused. Yeah. Well, he's on the Jets as well, though, right?
Yeah.
Jamison Crowder had the big game. That's what I meant. Yeah. So I'm going to trade Crowder, keep Robbie Anderson, cut N'Keal Harry.
Joe, what about you?
The problem here is I'd rather keep Jamison Crowder. I think he's better long term, but I don't think that Robbie Anderson has the value Crowder does. So I'm trading Crowder. I'm keeping Robbie Anderson, and I'm damn sure he shouldn't even be in the conversation cutting N'Keal Harry.
Hey, I like it because these aren't players. These aren't like top-notch players. This is a normal discussion.
No, this is realistic. You're actually thinking about cutting one of these guys.
Yeah, I like that.
You are not cutting Joe Mixon, even if he's a sleeper.
Gentlemen, thank you. Damon, go ahead.
Well, I'm like a aesthetic fantasy football player. I just didn't like the way that Robbie Anderson looked in like that jersey. Like he looked like a small boy. He looked like a small boy. Like everybody else were grown men. He looked like a boy playing football. So I would cut him. I would trade Harry based on that good game, and then I'm keeping Crowder. I just can't, like, the way he looked in those pads, it just was unforgiving.
And that was Trade Keep Cut by Styles Preference, brought to you by DeMont Ricks. Thank you. If I had it my way, I will say that I am probably, as sad as it is to say, I mean, I'm keeping him in Dynasty, but this was completely redraft purposes. I'm dropping N'Keal Harry. I'm going to try to trade Robbie Anderson. I still have faith in DJ Moore there. And I'll probably keep Jamison Crowder, knowing that offense is going to be horrible and that guy's going to get like 10 passes a game for 25 yards.
Yeah, real quick, don't sleep on DeAndre Swift. If the Lions don't fade him out, if he would have caught that touchdown, he would have had 18 fantasy points in full PPR, 2 touchdowns.
Hey, what did Kerryon Johnson do?
Nothing. Swift might have a bounce back.
Hey, what the hell, though? Can we talk about that real quick before we end the show? Adrian Peterson gets signed off the streets a week ago and has 94 yards and is the clear-cut workhorse over there.
I knew that was going to happen, bro. It's crazy. Like, I knew that. Like, I thought they were going to use him just like Washington did. Just feed him the ball. Just feed him the ball. Like,
bro, listen, they have Kerryon Johnson. They spent a second-round pick last year. Or third?
Yeah.
2 years ago. Kerryon's been in the league for 2 years. Yeah, they spent a second round pick on him.
DeAndre Swift, they spent an early second this year, and they're signing 34-year-old Adrian Peterson, bro. That is such a Matt Patricia from Bill Belichick move.
Exactly.
It's so it just proves why the Lions are who they are, because you spend a second round pick when you have so many holes on your team, and you sign Adrian Peterson and put him in front of him. It's like the Kings drafting De'Aaron Fox and signing freaking Alex Caruso to start over him. It just doesn't make sense.
They should have drafted Luka.
They should have.
Yeah,
right,
those are things that will present themselves later on down the season in future episodes for sure. We have a few more things to get through really quick. We're going to shout through them. It's always good to look at our fantasy footballers, podcasters league. We suffered a loss. We played the prodigy himself, the fantasy football oracle, and he looked through his globe and he saw that he was going to kick our ass, and he did. Technically, he didn't. Saquon Barkley and James Conner were trash, and we lost by 5 points. So I am fully confident. I've taken James Conner out of our lineup. We play the FF Lovers this week. Shout out to you guys. We're going to kick your asses too, hopefully. We'll talk more about their lineup next week and how the game went when we have more time. Last but not least, guys, we have our viewer question of the week. And our first one, thank you, Mike. I feel like we should send you a card. This is Mike from Rough Riders Fantasy. Do you prefer traditional waiver wire or fab?
That is a great question.
That was a great question.
A lot recently.
Thanks again, Mike from Rough Riders Fantasy.
That is a great question. I was thinking about it a lot because I was like, so between us four, we play in about 5 leagues, give or take a member or two. And we only have one league that uses fab. And I was like, I kind of want to use it in another one of our leagues because it's interesting. You know, it's how much are you willing to pay? And I won't say names, but in our Pick 6 league, we had somebody spend.
I'll say names. Gio spent half of his fab.
$250 on Hines and $250 on Joshua Kelly. I had fab in for both those guys, and I didn't get a chance to get either of them. But anyways, I kind of like fab more, to be honest, because you got to put your money where your mouth is. With the waiver thing, it's just random, kind of. It's very random. I like fab a little bit more.
It makes fantasy football that much more interesting and complex at the same time because you really have to consider where you put your value. With waiver wire pickups, if you have, first, second, third waiver wire priority, you're pretty comfortable. You're feeling like you're going to get a good guy week in and week out. With fab, you never know. There's always someone out there who might be looking at the same guy who's willing to spend more. And you don't know up until 2 or 3 in the morning when you wake up viciously to see, fuck, I didn't get him. So that was
Sometimes
me this morning, by the way.
I put a lot up and I'm like, I hope somebody else just pays more so I don't lose all this.
Yeah, I think the ultimate way is fab because you don't have that one person sitting since week 1 to week 10 just having their number one waiver.
Their number one.
Yeah. Fab I kind of want to change my league to that. I was thinking about it earlier this season. I played in auction leagues too, which is a shitload of fun. If you guys have never done it, we got to get one together. But
it's only the draft though, right?
No, it's a double. So you auction the league and then you fab the free agents. So, but either way, we're not talking about auction right now. We're just talking about fab. Dude, there's a strategy to it, right? Because Gio dropped 600 on Hines and Kelly, and then one other guy, Hawkinson, I think, and he's done. He will never really, maybe one more fat purchase, but he cannot outbid people in week 15, week 13, week 12. Say CMC goes down and we have a realistic backup come in, he's not going to be able to get that guy.
Where did Gio do that? What league?
In Pick 6.
In our league, Damon, Pick 6.
He spent like $550 on 3 guys.
Holy shit, he must have been drunk.
Yeah, so you wait, and if CMC gets hurt, I can go out there and I can drop 600 because I didn't spend $1 on Fab this week.
If you're creating a new league, go Fab. Go Fab.
Well, I'm in we're on my dynasty league. I'm gonna change it to Fab next year.
Yeah,
I already decided that.
Yeah, Fab's better.
Yeah, I like it too.
Well, again, thank you, Mike from Rough Riders Fantasy. We appreciate it. As always, guys, feel free to DM us in the Instagram feed, or you can email firstroundfantasy@gmail.com. We will get your questions on the show. We appreciate you so much if you do so. Guys, that is it. That is definitely one for the record books, boys. It is our first segment show of the season. Yeah. I am so excited. It's been fun. And now we're just here for the grind, fellas. So I hope you're ready.
Yeah, Monday nights, and then we're gonna record Monday nights. So we're gonna be hyped off some Monday Night Miracles or losses, and then they'll go up on Tuesdays.
Yeah.
You guys will be getting it on Tuesday mornings. Be on the lookout for that. With that being said, from us here all the way up in Northern California, wherever you're listening from, we appreciate you so much. Have a good night. We are out of here. Peace.